Singer Whitney Houston is dead. Courtney Hazlett, we have Courtney Hazlett, entertainment reporter, on the phone. Courtney, what can you tell us about Whitney Houston? Are you getting confirmation of her death?
Well, the AP has confirmation via one of her publicists. She does have a rather large management team. We haven't heard from everybody absolutely yet. I'm just learning about this a lot at the same time as we all are. This comes as a huge shock, obviously. Whitney had her ups and downs, like you just mentioned a few moments ago, but nobody saw this coming. I can tell you for sure that her management team was in talks for her to do more performances this year. So it wasn't like she was crawling away from the spotlight in any way. The early stages of her comeback were still in the works. She was supposed to do live performances later on in this calendar year. And definitely, this is not something that anybody anticipated. And as recent as a few days ago, wasn't it also being floated that she might be one of the judges on American Idol, that was a possibility for her? All these sort of big, splashy roles were bandied about as comeback roles for Whitney Houston. She's really beloved by her fans. It was one of those instances where you really cringed every time you heard a bad story about her. This is the ugly side of celebrity here. You hear some stories about celebrities kind of falling by the wayside, and people say, yeah, they had that coming. But with Whitney Houston, she had such an amazing voice, an amazing presence, and people really cherished what she was able to offer up to the world for so long. Nobody liked seeing her stumble as she did in recent years, so people really wanted her to come back. And seeing her as a judge on one of these shows really would have been inspirational to a lot of people, especially young artists who really look up to her. Courtney, what can you tell us about her drug use and her alcohol use? I mean, her drug use was very public. It was public in the reality show that she had, chronicling her marriage to Bobby Brown. Anyone watching that could have seen that these were two people who were seemingly using some sort of substance. And then she apparently was cleaned up. She came out with that new album a couple years ago. And then what did you hear about her use in the recent last year, 2 years? In recent years, anytime she would have any sort of difficulty, people would first say, okay, she's doing drugs again, or she's abusing alcohol again, or something along those lines. And a lot of times representation would say it's exhaustion or something along those lines, the exhaustion line that we hear so often with celebrities, whether it's true or not, or just sort of a cover-up for what really might be going on. But, this is a woman who had not battled all her demons, and we've heard from addiction experts every time a really sad story along the lines of this. Let's be clear, we don't know what cause of death was. At this point. But, no, we don't. Anytime you hear about these stories, addiction is something these people deal with lifelong. And with Whitney Houston, her addictions were not something that were 100% behind her, according to anybody who knew her well. And also according to people who knew her well, she grew up in this family of gospel singers out of Newark, New Jersey, and she really had a very sheltered upbringing, a very strict, sheltered upbringing. And it really wasn't until she became quite famous and dating famous people, and of course marrying Bobby Brown, that it was even obvious she had any sort of drug issue. Isn't that true? And this isn't something that's unique to Whitney Houston, of course. I mean, Hollywood, show business, if you will, in general, doesn't even just have to be the corner of Hollywood per se, but whatever aspect of show business you're ensconced in, this sort of lifestyle is something that tends to rear its head quite often, sadly enough. And Whitney certainly wasn't immune. No, she was not. And we also should mention they have a daughter, Bobby Christina. Do you know how old she is? Off the top of my head, I don't. I believe she's a teenager. Yeah, a teenager or nearing her 20s at most. But they do share a young daughter, and she too has had to deal with the spotlight. We